The world we live in is an amazing one, full of passion, wonderment, and of course, fine wine. This is the story of one man's journey to fully understand and appreciate that world. So kick the tires and light the fires. It's time to ride between the wines.
It's Burgundian in style. Just a whisper of cherry.
Very nice legs.
This is so perfectly balanced.
Such an old world style.
Is this laced with tobacco? A total fruit bomb.
I say, so fancy!
Like the wine guys right here, bro.
Hey, really? Beautiful. Yes. Hello, everybody. We are back in the car, and I have Antoine Joly.
Antoine Collet.
Collet.
Typical French, as you know.
Very, because you're born in Champagne.
That
Yes,
is correct.
perfect.
Born in a bubble.
I love it. Well, so this is a very special sort of a tasting day for me because usually we're just, I guess, going around tasting our wines with people and then letting them buy it and bring it to their restaurants. Today we're tasting wines that you cannot quite buy. We are tasting barrel samples, and that's very exciting to me. I've never done something like this. So
Yeah, and we come here every year to do it, so it's quite a special moment for us because we bring those barrel samples. They're still in barrels, and they will be in bottles in a couple months from now, and give the opportunity to some of your customers to taste those wines. And if they really want it, they gotta order it, and then we'll bring them in because we can't load the distributor with over 115 different SKUs as Maison Louis Jadot makes every year. So.
And explain to me exactly in what part of the process a barrel sample is. Are they tasting stuff that is going to continue to be in the oak for another 6 months, or is this...
It's a continuity of the wine that's still in barrels that will be there for another 2 months.
Okay.
And we want to show the development of the wines and how the vintage tastes and what they're expecting to be. So we give them the opportunity to taste the white and the reds, and showing them on 2018 vintage that the whites are quite juicy, quite opulent, and the red wines definitely velvety. It definitely has a more tannin structure. But 18 vintage was a phenomenal year, not only with quantity but with quality. So
It's fantastic. And is that across the board, north to south Burgundy?
I would say so. I mean, we had a little bit of drought in Mâconnais and in Chablis, but nothing to really worry about in terms of the productions and the quality of the wine. What's important to know is with Maison Louis Jadot, with a lot of people had questioned, and they always think that the wine is sold everywhere and it's massive production. It's actually not. I mean, the only 5 wines that really are what we call our bread and butter is really the Macon Village, Beaujolais Village, Puy-Fusé, Chardonnay, and Pinot Noir, which that is sold in a lot of places. But unfortunately, the label of Jadot is recognized and could be confusing because some of the Grand Cru and Premier Cru, they look alike, so you have to know your villages and your little appellations. So the wine that we're presenting today, they're mostly Domaine wines, which there's about 70 different Domaine wines at Maison Louis Jadot, and today we cover about close to 600 acres of vineyards. So we also the producer who has the largest library wine in terms of vintage with Bouchard Père-et-Fils, which we go back in our cellar to 1845.
That's fantastic. How often do you actually get out there?
I go there about once or twice a year. So, the greatest opportunity for me is when we go to Burgundy and we sit down with Pierre-Henri Gagier, who's the CEO, and be able to pick some of the wines from the cellar and taste older vintages, which last year we tasted at Chateau des Jacques, our property in Beaujolais, 1972, Moulin à Vent, Clos de Rochegray, and then I had Chambertin Magnum, 1911, previously before World War One. So it gives you goosebumps when you start drinking a wine like that. You think about your grandfather who's been to the war, and you think about the winery now, they're so spotless, and be careful how their cellar is organized and clean. And you're thinking about 1911, they're probably doing the pillage and stepping on the grape with their own foot, not manicured, of course.
Wait, so what does it taste like? 100-year-old wine, 1911.
It was a surprise for me because, first of all, coming from the Magnum and being stable in one of that cellar, of course, the importance is how it's been stored. But the wine was still so alive, and the color was so bright. I mean, the wine was I wouldn't say a baby because it was matured, of course, but I was blown away. I mean, you know, when I talk about this, like I say, I'm getting goosebumps.
Yeah,
because
sure.
because it's just a great memory. You know, you think about drinking champagne. It's when you have a special occasion. Well, you know, when you go to Burgundy and you taste the 1911, you're like so excited. You're pumped up. You're coming out. And you're like, you know what? You know, everybody thinks about Jadot being massive production. They're not. They just have a lot of small piece of the puzzle of Burgundy on a smaller scale. I mean, you know, we Musigny, we make 75 cases. You know, we make Clos de Bèze, you know, we make probably 3 barrels. You know, Bonnemar, we make maybe 2 barrels. So it's very small scale of wine of different appellations. But because we own a lot of different, like I say, piece of the puzzle, of course we make a lot of different SKUs.
Of course. Well, I look forward to hearing a lot more about those SKUs. We're going to pull over here in a second for a stop. But when we come back in, we're going to definitely dig into this.
Mike the Wine Guy, we'll be back.
All right, so we're back in the car after tasting the wines to get started off. So I have so many different questions to ask you, but one of the main questions that I want to... Oh, also, just to tell some of the viewers at home, I don't know that I actually said... Oh, yeah, we did say it. But if you are listening to the audio edition, there is Erica Taylor a few months ago actually was on one of the episodes, so look back and listen to her, and she actually covers all of the brands from Kobrand as opposed to just the French ones, and we touched base on Louis Jadot a little bit, Taittinger, Bouvet, a couple over there, so that would be fun to check that out if you haven't listened yet.
Okay, great.
I want to make sure I said that at some point.
Sounds good.
So Burgundy, which is everything that we're drinking today and talking about, is basically Chardonnay for the white and Pinot Noir for the red.
Yeah, but then you also have a couple different, you know, varietals like Aligoté, which we use in our Bouzeron, which was put on the map by Mr. Ovillain at the time, and then we actually bought 2.5 acres from him in 2011. Of course, you have Gamay from Beaujolais. And people don't know, but there's some Sauvignon Blanc as well in a little village called Saint-Brie. Voila. The wine guy knows it all.
I know that one. Well, actually, you know, the Bouzeron, which I'll try to type these things out, so if you don't know all these French words, the Aligoté from Bouzeron that Jadot has, I tried for the first time just a couple of months ago, and it knocked my socks off. I thought it was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a different wine for people who don't really care for Chardonnay or don't really want Sauvignon Blanc that's too maybe tart for them or too citrusy. I think it's a good middle wine. Has a nice roundness to it, a little bit of richness on the finish, but also crisp and clean in the same time. So the most important thing is really the value. As you know, in the past couple of years, Burgundy has been raising their price because the yield of the vintage been lower and lower, so price point was higher, quantity was lower, and now we're back on track. So, you know, the focus here is really to target some of the great village wines like in the Côte-Chalonnaise, for example, Bouzeron or Ruy or Mercury, but also in the southern part of Beaune with like Saint-Tenay and Auxey-Durès and maybe Ladois Clos d'Orge, for example, is really on the bottom slope of Corton-Charlemagne, which you have almost the same terrain and you know, with much cheaper price point.
Tell me this, how do you have any advice for somebody who is walking through a bottle shop and trying to find a good Burgundy and has no idea what the labels mean? Is there a...
You know, I mean, that's why you have people at bottle shops to drive you, and you know, if you have any question, they should be able to, you know, direct you in the type of wine you're looking for. You know, as like I said before, Burgundy is really complex. Even myself, I don't know the in and out of it. I learn things all the time. It's probably one of the more complex region to learn about. And you know, you just have to go there and visit because it's all about names of appellations and villages and etc. So if you don't know geography, you might get lost, you know.
I agree. Well, this is so I love Burgundy. I love the entire the way that Burgundy is set up as opposed to Bordeaux, for example, like the Appalachians and all the lands versus estates, I guess. But this was turned out to be a very short segment. We got here quicker than I thought. When we come back, I'd love to talk a little bit about maybe the history of Burgundy and kind of how all that got established. And I'd also love to, without taking your entire day, is maybe talk about the little differences between Pinot Noir from different regions for somebody who might be trying them all, and you're 6 different Pinot Noirs, all from the same general area. What makes them different? So
we'll have to talk about terroir a little bit more in depth. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all Burgundy. It's all about terroir and specific area. So,
well, perfect. Be right back. All right, so we're back in the car, and I just really interrupted Antoine because I was like, no, let's talk about this on film. So the story of Burgundy and how we got all of the regions, I imagine, is a very long story. But if you can give me like a Cliff Notes version of it,
a diagram of it.
A little diagram would be great.
Well, it's not easy to explain, but make the story short. The monks were making the wines for some of the kings, and the kings had designated area in terms of Burgundy. The date, I believe, was back in the early or late 1700 when that happened, and officially done in early 1800. So, of course, the designation of the appellation of Premier Cru and Grand Cru were done right after that. But the one cool thing that we need to know is that we have the Hospice de Beaune, where we do all those auction barrels every year. But the Hospice de Beaune was originally an hospital, and for the people who were sick at the time but didn't have any money, that were poor but had land on their own, would pay the hospital by sharing or giving a piece of their land through the Hospice de Beaune. And that was kind of a rip-off, because you would need to get healthcare done, and you were losing kind of your land. So, but that was kind of the time, the way they did it. Another cool story is when you think about Corton-Charlemagne, which was originally planted only in red, and basically got replanted in white, because Charlemagne, his wife, was getting always upset because he loved red wine so much, and he had such a big white beard that every time she would be with him, his beard would be all reddish by drinking all this red wine. So, he decided that afterwards they were planting Chardonnay grapes, so now his wife wouldn't be complaining about him anymore and having his beard completely white every time she see him. So
that's fantastic.
That's kind of a mimic in Burgundy that people always talked about. But
we can thank Charlemagne's wife for all the amazing Chardonnay.
What else? At the time, that's so many mistresses that that's why they divided some of the vineyard. Charlemagne and Corton-Charlemagne and Bâtard-Montrachet and Montrachet. So there's a cool story. There's a book on that that should be read and be a little bit more getting in depth to what's happening in Burgundy.
What's the name of that book?
That's I don't remember the name of that book. I'm sorry. I wish I would.
Okay.
I know there's a book about it. I don't remember the name of the book. I know you were going to ask me that question.
I saw you just
the wine guy,
the name
of course. He's asking me that question. Why did I go into that?
Well, one thing I did want to do is, if we can not get too teeny regions, but if we can kind of go north to south and just tell me a little, Chablis, Côte d'Or, kind of move
course.
down.
I mean, when you Chablis is of course located, it's the northern part of Burgundy, which is halfway between Dijon and Paris. Chablis in the old days was the wine really reflected on more of the kind of a maritime influence, very, due to the ice age when Burgundy was underwater 300 million years ago, and you still can find in the ground, some fossil or shelf, life that used to be there. So the mineral, where the vines are planted or reflected in the wine that you make. Today, with the microclimate and the changing of temperature, we feel that the Chablis is getting a little bit more rounder and creamier, but still a great appellation. It's coming out strongly. It was a little bit forgot about it because in California they use those box wine with Chablis and Chianti and Bourgogne and all that. That was unnecessary, but we got all that straight out, and so Chablis is always a good area to start in Burgundy, going down to the Côte de Nuit with Marsanne, and another great area that people know, of course, is Nuit Saint-Georges and Givry-Chambertin. When you go to the Côte de Beaune, you will find a lot more of those silky, very seductive, feminine red wines, except for Pommard, which we always think it's the more masculine wine of all the Beaune area. And then you have, of course, the Côte Chalonnaise, where you have some value wines, a little bit more rocky soil, where you find Bouzeron that we've been tasting all day and everybody's been talking about it.
Yeah.
But we also have Rouillet, and we have Mercury, and a lot more there with great appellations. Santenay for me in the southern part of Beaune, just right after the major Côte des Blancs with Meursault, Pouligny, and Chassagne. I think those wines have great value. They're very approachable, and they have a really high-end designations. Then, of course, in the Mâconnais, where we purchased a really wonderful winery in 2008, which is Domaine Ferret. If you never had the chance to taste those wines, you should, because most of all the sommelier in the United States wants to carry Domaine Ferret on their list. It's a really true appellations of the Mâconnais region, and of course it's the higher wine of the Mâconnais, because then you have Mâcon Village and Mâcon Louny, and you have over 40 different little villages that you can't make Mâcon Village from. But Jadot has been really ahead of everybody, thinking that you have the opportunity to buy land. If you have the money, then we do it, because having a large spread out area of tiny appellations in Burgundy is the key to be able to express your type of wine that you want to reflect from each area. And today we have Frederic Barnier, which has been our wine director since his first vintage in 2013, that took over Jacques Lardiere, that did 42 vintages at Maison Louis Jadot, that breathe, that leave the vineyard every day and know exactly when the drop of rain fell on a certain area, or hailstorm or frost. The guy is really a full book of Burgundy. Quite crazy, but the guy is got good reputations, and that's why after his retirement we decided to put him on our new project that we got in Oregon, which we made a wine called Resonance, which we started in 2013 with the Resonance vineyard in Yamhill Carton AVA, which we produce about 3,000 bottles, and of course the Dundee AVA and the Willamette appellations. So we're excited. He's been on that project, and interesting enough, 2013 was a difficult vintage in Oregon, and we're not too far from Ken White wineries and Beaufort, and of course Ken White had a discussion with Jacques Lardiere and said, "My God, I tasted your wine. What did you do that we didn't do in that vintage?" He said, "Well, first, I picked before the rains. Like you didn't do that." So that's a big difference to start with. But just to say that Jadot is kind of following the footsteps of the Drouin and the Jacques Lafon, in Oregon, and then of course Beaujolais, which is something we try to bring back to the map strongly, because it's been forgotten quite a bit in the wine industry, which this shouldn't be, with Chateau de Jacques that we purchased in 1996. So a lot to say, a lot to write about, but we are excited. And the last acquisition of Maison Louis Jadot is the vineyard in Santenay with Prieur-Brunet, Santenay Premier Cru, La Maladière, and Clos Rousseau as well. Any other question you want to ask?
Probably a lot of other questions I want to ask. But first, I love the fact, just to make sure I understand, the winemaker over all the Louis Jadot for 42 years decided to retire, and your retirement present was you're going to go to Oregon and make more wine for us?
Well, the story is you can never remove a guy that loves wine so much than Jacques Lardiere, and he would be so bored that he took 8 months retirement, and it's like, if we're gonna get on that project with Oregon, I want to be part of it. So he's been working partially on the side with Pierre-Henri Gagé, the CEO, they've been side by side for over 42 vintages, because he started in 1970. So
does he fly back and forth?
Yes,
or does he actually
does.
live? Okay.
No, he flies back and forth, and he knows everybody now in Willamette, which is the Burgundy guy with the red pants and the white hair like Santa Claus. Everybody. He made a stamp in Oregon, so everybody loves him. He's quite a character.
We are almost to the next account. I do want to ask if you could sum up in a little bit. You started to go into Beaujolais and Nouveau, and how the producers there are trying to distance themselves from that. What would you say is the big difference between a Cru Beaujolais and then the Beaujolais Nouveau that we're so familiar with?
Well, for example, I'll give you a very quick idea is, Beaujolais Nouveau, first of all, we don't believe in this wine, so we don't make it, because we feel it's kind of like the white Zinfandel in the United States. That's not a wine. It was something that rosé came up, and people disturbed the rosé wine and had a hard time coming up, with the Côte de Provence and all those wines for a long time. But going back to Beaujolais, the Cru Beaujolais are the most refined, the most elegant, and the higher end wines of Beaujolais. I mean, especially with Chateau de Jacques, when you make a wine that doesn't have any carbonic macerations, you can age those wines quite a long time. We go back in our cellar all the way to 1945, which I tasted in 1972 in July with Claude et Rochegray, which was amazing and so tasty, and which was my birthday, and I was like, wow, this is a treat. But you have Beaujolais, and you have Beaujolais Village, and you have the Cru Beaujolais. Of course, the price points is a bit different, but it's still all very good value at the end. You can buy a Cru Beaujolais for probably $30, in retail. So, and great wine to bring during Thanksgiving when you go in the holidays, see your family. Goes well with white meats and all those side dishes that you make for Thanksgiving.
So, if you take nothing more away from it than this, go try some Cru Beaujolais. It's awesome.
And Chateau de Jacques.
And Chateau de Jacques.
Do not hesitate.
All right, we'll be back in a bit.
Bye.
All right, so we are in the car for the final one, and I actually don't know what we're going to talk about.
We drink too much Burgundy wine. We have nothing to talk about at this point. I'm just kidding.
Mike, the wine guy, does not drink while he's driving.
That is
or
true.
Before.
He hasn't drank the whole day, actually. It's very professional, by the way.
Thank you. Once I drop you off, then I'm going to drink the rest of the samples. Well, one question, I feel like we've talked about Jadot, and you kind of led into this to start off with, is about how everybody knows the iconic label. What is that a label of? That face that's on all the bottles?
So the label of Louis Jadot, first of all, on the neck of the bottle, you have Bacchus, which is the wine goddess, and the wine god is very important for Jadot because they represent the quality, and you can't go wrong by putting that face on the label. The only thing that's been a conversation piece quite a bit in a few years is why we would not change certain labels to diverse the wine that we sell from the original aspect in a few supermarkets, and having the Premier Cru and Grand Cru Domaine wine with a different label. Well, the problem has been so long since Jadot was founded in 1859. It's been a signature, and the people who know Jadot buy Jadot, and so to change something for the loyal customers might be not a disaster, but maybe they wouldn't recognize what to buy.
Right.
And the collectors. So, we have to stick with it. And the only thing they're doing now, and the French are pretty stubborn, I gotta say. So it's hard to, tell them to change things. But we have done a few things like the Duc de Magenta and, the Prieur-Brunet that we just purchased, which we want to keep the authenticity of that label because people know that wine from the past. So we don't want to change that to the Jadot label, just like we don't want to change the Jadot label to something else.
Right.
You know?
But The Chateau de Jacques label looks kind of similar to the Jadot
It
label.
was even more like the Louis Jadot label in the past. We kind of removed the border of the label, that Jadot has. We made it more lighter, creamy, yellowish, which I think they should have it white originally. That would be a better idea. But I'm not the one who makes the wine. I'm not the one who decided marketing. So I'm just here to sell the wine and educate people on it, which is already enough on my plate. But yeah, like I say, it's like if you ask Chateau Lafite to change their label, they probably wouldn't do that.
Well, right, yeah.
Yeah. But when you think about it, when you look at Burgundy, you have the Drouhin wines, they're all the same. If you look at the Bouchard-Perret Fils, they're all the same. If you look at Louis Latour, it's all the same. And people do not complain about that when you talk to them. But it's just because, our yellow label is kind of like a brain recognitions, just like people buy orange label and not knowing it's Veuve Clicquot because they don't pronounce it, but they'll buy the orange label.
Right.
They will say, do you have the orange label champagne?
How many, I would imagine, how many countries do you sell it in? That's got to be another thing that across the board, every country, recognizes
I would
it.
say about 90 countries.
What is the consumption like within France? Is that one of your bigger markets or more exporting?
No, export is a big market. I mean, U.S., Asia, South America. France is a good share, but more on the lower hand wines, not on the Premier Cru and Grand Cru appellations, I would say. Only in Beaune, because all the tourists, the American comes and they drink, those great wines. But, the French in general, except if you're in the wine business, but the general consumer, they're not big spender in wine, the French people, to be honest with you, if they drink wine, they buy a lot of box wine. You'd be surprised.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Because the economy. Because the amount of money that they make. And when you have a person making an average of €1,200 a month, and then they have to pay their rent, and they have to pay their grocery and their gasoline and all that, they're not really willing to spend €10 or €15 on a bottle of wine.
So they spend less on wine, but what does their consumption look like compared to us, for example?
Well, by the format, United States is so much bigger than France. I mean, France is
more like per capita. Would you have any idea?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. That would be wrong for me to say something that I'm
fair enough.
Not quite sure about the answer.
Growing up in Champagne,
Yeah.
what did you all drink?
What's nice in Champagne is you have a lot of friends that have stores, and it doesn't matter if it's a pastry shop or a butcher shop. And when you do your shopping around town, and you know them, and you have friends that are making champagne, they always take you in the back of the house and give you a little goblet of champagne for breakfast or aperitif. There's always a good time for enjoying a glass of champagne.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Well, all right. Well, we are pulling over to drop you off, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure riding in your car. I feel like it's like the taxi ride where, you don't know what's going to happen.
Was it pretty good, though?
It was amazing. It's such a pleasure meeting you. I think your podcasts are very popular and keep growing, and I think it's important for people like you to do so, to be proactive and to help other people to understand wine that they may purchase down the road.
Well, thank you. I hope that's true too. You guys can't see our faces now because of the light. But drink Louis Jadot. It's delicious. I'm going to take in the show notes a lot of the French words that we might not have caught. And if I get good at editing in 3 weeks when this comes out, at the bottom I'll even write down what we're saying. But if not, check the show notes. Otherwise, thanks very much, and we'll see you soon.
You're welcome. Thank you.